born on a small island in the middle of Bass Strait called King Island back in when dinosaurs ruled the earth. And it was bleak, and that's because it's in the middle of the roaring 40s, and if you know your geography, there's a constant wind, it's cold, and the people, you're very isolated, and the people become insular and parochial. And if you weren't born on the island, way back when, your families, you were considered an outsider. So we were outsiders because we were sole settlement farmers. Just a bleak, I mean, I had a fabulous childhood, but just bleak is the word that comes to mind about the island. It's, bleak, just bleak. Middle of suburbia, or almost inner suburbia. It's a strip shopping centre, and it really is lovely to live where I live at now, because I'm central to everything. It's got everything I want, and it's so different from when I grew up that I don't want, don't want to do it again. Don't want to do farming again. So it's exactly where I want to be now. I don't have to do anything except enjoy where I live. Enjoy where I live. All right, I have a scar on the bottom of my left foot, where my ankle and my foot sort of, that joint is. And how I got that was my father we had a wood-fired heating appliance for washing up the equipment we used when we milked. We were dairy farmers on King Island, and he would stoke the fire by putting his gumboot. We had gumboots because it was wet mud and all of that, so they were made out of plastic rubber, and he would stoke the fire by putting his foot into the aperture where you put the wood. I was about, let me think, maybe 7. I did the same, and I had the inevitable happened, and I have the hot coal went because I only had small gummies, so I didn't have the long ones, and I went down and it burnt onto my foot. I have a scar to this day. Not fabulously overwhelmed by my physical features, just to give some context, because been overweight all my life, so growing up in a fat-phobic society, not a good place. I don't think I've got a bad social presence, that if you put me in a situation where I don't know anybody or people are awkward, I can make people comfortable or talk to people given any circumstances. I can put on the social, my social manners, for the want of a better terminology, and make me feel comfortable, and hopefully the other person feel comfortable, probably as a result of being overweight all my life. I had to accentuate what I thought was a better quality, and for people to overlook that my body wasn't slim, fat, thin and fabulous sort of thing, but they didn't see that. They remembered the personality rather than the body. Oh no, that's not an easy question. You ask me on any day and I'll give you a different answer. Ask me a favourite book in a genre, that's probably easier. Favourite book springs to mind is Anne McCaffrey's Restoree, which is a fabulous story anyway, but I love the backstory, which was that it was written in the middle of the 1960s, and at that stage, women written in science fiction / fantasy, they were very minor and they needed to be saved. Oh, save me, Brad! Scenario. And Anne McCaffrey wrote this book as a sod you, and that made the main protagonist, female, and her male protagonist wasn't weak by any means, but because of her skill sets, she could get him out of, or help him achieve what he needed to do. So it's just a really good, I suppose, neo-feminist writings in a science fiction setting, because the male character wasn't weak, but if it didn't have that really strong female character with a broad range of experiences like we all do, the story would have fallen down. So probably that's one of my favourites. So we'll go with that one today. As I haven't seen a movie in nearly 15 years, since Mum died, favourite movie? No. None springs to mind. I suppose, look, the last one I saw, which was Mad Max Fury Road, because it was shoot 'em up, put your brain on hold and just go along for the ride. Oh my goodness. Again, different genre, Tom Waits, Closing Time. He was 25, it was his first album, and it's just this melodic story of people being lost in a bar, and it's just it just resonates, because you think this man is 25. How can he talk about somebody who, what's happening in a middle-aged person's life or an older person's life? They've gone to a bar and it's closing time, and you just know that once they go out of the bar, there's nothing to go home to. It's just heartbreaking, really, but it's just done in such a way that it's glorious. That again, bit like books. Sorry, bit like it's the one that came to mind the first. There are others in my brain that I probably say, "What about me? What about me?" But Closing Time. Those who do not learn from the mistakes of history are bound to repeat them, because it's been bound to be a truism. If you look at what's happening in the world today and you look at history, you go, we haven't learned. Tuberose. It's a incredibly powerful plant, flower. Looks like, the flower itself doesn't look very much at all, but it has this most pungent, lingering smell. Tuberose. Not PC, warning, not PC. Why do babies have fontanelles, which is the soft spot? When babies are born, they have a soft spot, which is where, so they can, their skull bones can do that, to be born naturally. For them to grow in, it's got a little soft spot, literally where there's no bone. So why do babies have soft spot? Carry 6 at a time. Told you it wasn't PC. Oh my goodness. Fictional place. Pern. Again, it's a land or a world that was created by, again, Anne McCaffrey, and it's a world where dragons live, where dragons exist, and they are genetic. Everybody thinks it's fantasy, when in actual fact it's science fiction, because when the colonists arrived, they had what they call fire dragons, and they genetically modified them to become dragons. Loyalty. First, middle and last. I have a nursing friend called Linda. She was just a brilliant friend. And how I lost contact with her, I got out of nursing and she stayed in nursing, and I think that she couldn't cope with that. Is the only thing I can come up with. And yeah, that's the short and long of it.
Would you ever reach out to her?
If I knew where she was, yes. She knows, but she knows where I am too. It's a two-way street. and she's obviously doesn't want to get that friendship together, and I have to respect that. Diverse bunch of knuckleheads, if you like. I don't have one type of friend. I have somewhat. My sister's a really good friend of mine. Totally different relationship to my Auntie Helen, to my brother-in-law. I would consider them friends. To other friends outside of the family. Different niches, I suppose. Different parts of my personality or my life have different friends. Like I've had friends for 20 years, nearly 30 years, whom I wouldn't introduce to other friends because it would not be a good mix. Just so different parts of my life, slashes of my personality. No, they're just, it's sort of organic. I hate that word, but organic. Something happens and you go, that was really lovely, and you move on. But it's only an moment. It's not, I don't sit down and, really cogitate on times past. Tend to live in the now, because when you get to my age, if you think about what's happened in the past, it can be quite soul destroying in some respects. So you remember a period, you go, yeah, that was lovely, move on. Well, I do anyway. Be a zoologist. Didn't have the sciences to do it at university, but a zoologist. Helped stack shelves in a supermarket. Hairdresser's apprentice. Basically swept up the hair, washed people's hair, then went nursing, and then became a bookseller, so not much. Rewind. I'm a second-hand bookseller. I love what I do, and to expand, I have my own working hours. I'm a book reader from way back, and I love what I do. Same question, same answer. People. Sometimes you get the most amazing people come through, and they're interesting, and they're funny, and they've got life's experiences, and you just go, wow. And then you get the other people and you think, get out of my shop, because they're entitled, they're angry, and how dare you not have what I want because I'm here. I should be served right now. So same the clientele. Nursing. Not in the last part of my experiences, but when I was in ICU, I was an ICU nurse, and that's intensive care for those who don't know. But when I was training, we trained under the most extreme circumstances. Like I trained at the Royal Brisbane Hospital, and we were indentured slaves for the want of we got paid, maybe, and we worked like you would not believe. They would not allow it these days. You knew that when you went on to the ward that you had 8-hour shift and you had 12 hours worth of work to fit into 8 hours. And if you didn't do it, get all the work that you were allocated to do, that the poor sod coming on after you would have to pick up the slack and do an extra whatever you didn't do plus their lot of work. So it was hard yakka. Do you want to know about the worst day I ever had? All right, I would have been halfway through my training. I had what they call, I had the ability to give out drugs, which you had to pass a test for. So I was 20. And my ward assignment was, I went on to the facio-maxillary ward, which is a reconstruction and whatever of the face and neck area. And it was a busy ward. It was a ward of 45 beds. and it was usually full. I walked on to a 7 a.m. shift, morning shift, okay? And because I was what they call a senior nurse, there was the charge nurse, there was another RN who did all the dressings, and as you can imagine, the dressings in a facio-maxillary ward would have been horrendous. There was me as the most senior nurse. I was 20. There was a white cap, meaning that she was she was just starting nursing training, and there was an EN for 45 people. Okay? The charge didn't get any beds allocated to her. The other RN was the dressing person. So between three of us left, we had 45 patients to deal with. I got beds 1 to 10, plus I also had to do the drugs, okay, for 45 people. So meaning getting the first 10 beds, had to make sure that they were clean, they had their shower and changed their beds, changed their linen. The night before, there was a hideous, and I mean hideous, car accident in a place called Beaudesert, or Beaudesert if you want. And about 3 people had died, and it was, and a lot of injuries. And one of the injured people, which was a lady, had come into the ward. She had a Lefort fracture 3. And I'll explain. A Lefort fracture 3 was that part of her face had been broken away from the rest of her skull. All right? She'd had a pneumothorax, which means that she had a piece of broken ribs that wasn't attached to the rest of her rib cage, and it was going in and out with her breathing. Pneumothorax. She had a tube coming out of that. She had a broken arm. She had a broken femur. But the major thing was that she had this Lefort fracture 3, meaning that she was dripping CSF from a cerebrospinal fluid from her nose. We are talking major problems, all right? And she needed one-on-one nursing, and she should not have been in the ward at all. I had to look after this lady and 9 other people, and I was 20. Worst memory, and we're talking 40 years ago, and I remember her injuries. But she was amazingly unwell. Thankfully, someone grew a brain or had a rush of blood to the common sense, and she got shifted to intensive care. But and I had to not only look after her, but do the beds and make sure everybody else was clean, and then do the drugs for the rest of the ward. Not fun. I was 20. I was a nurse 17 years. I mean, it was a baptism of fire, like old school training. People say, oh, it didn't happen. Oh, yeah, it did. Oh, yeah, it did. It's a wonder more people didn't die, really. Because in Brisbane, you could become a nurse at 17. You think about it. You think about that. That if somebody had started at 17, I was old at 20, doing my training, or older. You could start nursing at 17. So halfway through your training, you're 18 and a half, all right? And you get presented with that. And you were expected to deal with that and do it well and make sure that everything was done right. 18 and a half. You just don't. I honestly, it made you tough, or you either put it aside, you grew the barrier, did the best you can, put it aside. As soon as you stepped out of the ward, you left it there. Because if you took it home, you'd start A lot of nurses became alcoholics, became drug addicts because they couldn't put it behind themselves. And it also goes for doctors, because you have to leave it behind. While you're there, you do the best you can. But as soon as you step out of that ward, you leave it behind. You have to have that mental strength to put it behind. Think about it really carefully, because you have literally people's lives in your hands. Everybody says, oh, it's lovely to be a nurse. Oh my goodness gracious me. No, it's not. Because you're low man on the totem pole, so if anything goes wrong, it's your fault, because the doctors will, the old boys and girls club, they will protect their own. So the nurses are the low man on the totem pole. You are in a very vulnerable position. So you think about it very carefully. Interesting in as much as you go, really? When I had the second-hand shop in Chapel Street, my first crew of cats, the first cat David and I ever got was a grumpy old girl called Telzy, and she was a grey cat. She was a half Russian blue, and she was a grumpy old girl. And before we got any other cats, I had a box that she would sit in, sleep in. And this lady came in the afternoon, and she came in, I was sitting behind the desk, and she came in and she started berating me about giving my cats Valium, because I walked down the street and the cat hasn't moved. And I thought, do you have cats? Because it's a cat, it's in a box. It's really... Oh, even better, Pixel, big ginger boy. He was 13 kilos, all right. Yeah. And he, in Chapel Street, I had display cabinet or display shelves, and on the bottom was where the cats displayed themselves. And they could go in and out as they willed. If they wanted to be there, they could. If they didn't, not a problem. And Pixel was in the window. It was 40 degrees in the water bag. It was one of those hot Melbourne days. And this woman came in and she started berating me how dare I put the cats in the window and, lock them in and without access to water and shade and everything like that. And Pixel got up, stretched, walked off the shelf and plonked himself onto the cold tile floor. She looked at me, looked at the cat and went, okay, and walked out. Accounting. I can't do math. I'm word blind. Not word blind. I'm number blind. I can do, and in saying that, I'm not saying I'm stupid at maths, but no. All of those numbers, not my department. Next. How to ascertain what a first edition is, and knowing that which publisher's first edition starts with a number 2, not a number 1. Number lines, most people, don't know what the hell those number lines mean, and what 1, starting at 1 or 2 and then going to 0, what that means. But there's one publisher that their first edition starts with number 2. It's an American publisher, and I've just successfully forgotten it. But most people don't know that. They see, if they know about the number lines and they don't know about this particular publisher's proclivities, even though it says first edition, and it is, but the number line starts at 2. Gregarious, welcoming, forthright. David's death. You don't lose your partner of over 30 years without a few incidences of crying. It's the last time. sounds like blowing just how smart I am. Just how smart I am. I lived with David for 30 years. Get out of bed anywhere from 7:30 to 8:30, make my bed, have a shower, clean the cat's litter out, give them food if they need to, make sure they've got water, feed me whatever, usually porridge. Then make sure that I wrap my posting to wherever, make sure that's all done, depending, that can be anywhere from 6 through to 35 parcels or more or less. Post them. If it's a Monday through to Friday, I then come to the other shop and I open that up, and then I do work in that's inputting books, taking photographs, uploading both the books and the photographs, checking Gmail, getting orders if there are, finding those orders, doing all the computer work, coming home, feeding me and the cats and going to bed. At the moment it's a ongoing thing, trying to find a new system or routine since David's died. But that's basically what I do in a nutshell. Monday to Friday. Saturday I stay in the other shop, much the same, get up. And 2 days a week I go to personal training, and then Thursday I go to my Auntie Helen for coffee and conversation, bit of sewing, and go out as go up and see David's mum. But normal day is just work, getting up, and rinse and repeat. My perfect day would be having a lot more routine, in as much as that I wouldn't lose time. I would be much more efficient in doing the books, maybe even doing them the night before. So I get up, do my morning routine, cats, me, whatever, and then just pick up the books that I've already packed the night before, take them down to the post office, and be more efficient with my time, so that when I come home I'm not as tired, and I do the packing of the posting books, so I have a better routine. That would be my perfect day. David, my husband, I was 35 when I got married, which is, even for my age group, is, I was well and truly on the shelf or in spinster or whatever you want to call me. Wasn't looking to get married. He was the best thing that ever happened to me, and sometimes the worst, but the best thing that happened to me, and the luckiest, because yes, he was a very difficult person, but he was my friend. First and foremost, put on your big girl panties and grow up. Get a grip. We are doing stupid stuff. And we've been doing stupid stuff for way too long. If we were children, we would tell them to grow up and stop doing what we're doing. And I'm talking about arms race. I'm talking about decimating the planet. I'm talking about, people with egos the size of the universe thinking we can do this and we can do this with impunity. Grow up. You can't. There are consequences. The world hasn't learned consequences of actions. And that, until you mature, no one will. time with my mother. And no, I don't know. So just time with family. Not one person, but just time with family that I remember. Bavaria, which is a flower, intrinsically, it's a bit like a flower called tuberose. It's a very pungent and very distinctive smell, and it reminds me of my mother's mum's mum. They had a Bavaria tree growing outside their front door, and when it flowered, amazing. Being drowned by my sister and brother. On where I was born, King Island, we fished. That was our relaxation. And Dad bought a 14-foot aluminium dinghy. And one of the first times we took it out, we cleaned it, we kept it clean. And my older brother and sister were cleaning it out, and I was helping him, and I was underneath in the middle of the boat. And they flipped it, and I was in the middle of the boat. They got it out. Obviously they got it, but I was drowning. I didn't think to drop underneath it and come up. It was just such a shock. So that's my earliest memory. I regret not taking my weight seriously because I'm now type 2 diabetic and have been since I was 40. I should have taken, shoulda, coulda, woulda. I should have taken it seriously because anybody who's a diabetic knows that it's a slow, progressive illness, and it's you paddle very hard to keep the level of whatever at that. And that would make the pathway that I'm on so much easier. But it is what it is. It is what it is.
What is the biggest regret of your life?
That I didn't go to university. That I didn't follow what I wanted to do, which was become a zoologist. I know why I didn't do it. It was very pragmatic. But I would have sort of in the back of my mind, would I have been a good zoologist? I don't know. Follow your dreams. Become what you wanted to be, not choose something that would make your mum and dad's life easier, because they would have been quite happy supporting you for those years that you were in university. That's what I regret. That's what I would tell her. David and I were going out. We were not married. Full disclosure, David was Jewish. I am not. And when we got together, David was very secular and remained secular all our married life. And we were invited to his brother's birthday party. And my knowledge of Judaism at that stage was pretty minimal. We'll say zero. I knew what it was, so we'll put it to you that way. And we were invited to his brother's birthday at his brother and his then wife's place. So we came dressed up for a birthday party. Okay? And then we arrived. David's in jeans, I'm in mauve, I can remember it. Mauve, party gear. And they open up, we go into the room. It's second night, Rosh Hashanah. Holy guacamole. I've never been so embarrassed in my life. Thankfully, David's other brother was there, and there was dead silence. Everybody looked at us, and they're dressed up like pox doctors, clerks, in their best bib and tucker. So that means best clothing. And we're dressed in very casual gear. Everybody knows I'm not Jewish, so all of a sudden this shiksa is not respecting the religion. Oh my goodness. And it's the first time I meet the wife's parents who are Orthodox. That went over like a Led Zeppelin. And it wasn't a good time. Exercise. Because exercise and I are not good friends. I work very hard as a dairy farmer's daughter. Like physical activity was not something that you did on you think, oh, we'll go and do some physical exercise. It's just what you did, because it was mum, dad and the kids were the workforce. So that's what happened. And I never picked it up after we left the farm until very late. Needed to get into my headspace that I needed to exercise. All right, full disclosure here. Opening a pack of Tim Tams and eating the packet. Drink Strongbow alcoholic cider and finish off with a Glenfiddich scotch. Never, ever, ever again. I can't do it anyway, but even under the threat of death, would I not do it?
It was a rough time, I take it?
3 days talking to the toilet. No, I gave myself alcoholic poisoning. Really severe alcoholic poisoning. And I spoke to the porcelain god for quite some time. My liver to this day does not speak to me. That's why I am basically teetotal, because of Glenfiddich and Strongbow alcoholic cider. 10 foot high and bulletproof when you're young. You're not.
How old were you?
27-ish, 25, 27, somewhere around there. Old enough to know better, young enough to still do it. Still think I could get away with it. Learn. My sister says it most succinctly. A definition of madness is doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different outcome. If you make a mistake, we're all human, and that's fine. You're allowed to be making mistakes. But learn from them, because if you don't, reference what's happening in the world. Learn. The person that pops into my mind is a bloke by the name of Feynman, who was a physicist and was part of the people who did Los Alamos, the nuclear. It was just on the cusp, or just as they were starting to wind down. And he was a bongo player, and apparently he was a most amazingly rounded and erudite man. And I don't know, my interest in quantum physics is about zero, but just the fact that he appears from a well-rounded man, I'd like to sort of pick his brain. Hypocrites. Do as I say, don't do as I do. Probably put most politicians under that banner, but hypocrites. That you were I don't remember the sort of the compliments per se, but it meant that it was lovely talking to you. I had a better time, a better time than I thought I would. Probably golden rule. If you don't want it done to you, don't do it to other people. Because it's really easy to say, sorry, that doesn't make sense. It's really easy to be critical and vengeful when you know that it's not going to blow back on you. So if you don't want something horrible done to you, and horrible is insert your own personal preferences, then don't do it to other people. My husband David, because he was endlessly interesting. though I could have cheerfully kicked him from here to Siberia and back, he was incredibly smart, incredibly interesting, and his breadth and depth of knowledge was amazing. Going to America using Kontiki. That was an experience.
Tell me about it.
Okay, I was just on the cusp of being too old. I was 24 and a half. They had a cut-off 18 to 25. It was the second year that Kontiki had been running in America, and it was as rough as Hessian underwear, to say the least. And it was just an eye-opener for America, because I was expecting them to be like Australians, and let me tell you, they're not. Even more so back in the middle 80s. And it was just an amazing experience, because the country is beautiful. And New Orleans is great. Would go back to New Orleans in a flash, but only the New Orleans in my memory, not the New Orleans that is reality these days. It was just so different. I mean, so much, just so different. It was really great. In 1978, maybe? 78, went on a trip to Bali, and Bali back in that day was, there's only so many days you can stay on the beach and bake yourself to a rather lovely toasty tan. So we decided, with two other nurses, we decided to go to a place called Lake Toba, which is a large freshwater lake in Sumatra? Maybe Sumatra. No, then went to Java, into Sumatra, yeah. And it was just beautiful. It was just stunning. Now it's probably got multi-story things all around it, but at that stage it was just beautiful. It was calm, freshwater lake. We drank and just washed in the lake. It was really weird, but it was just superb. On the beach, not swimming or fishing, just on a beach, there's some beautiful places, North Queensland, on not Cairns and below. Cairns is ugly, but Cairns and below, there's some just, where's that damn butterfly? There's an island, and it was just, there was a just peaceful, there was rainforest, and you looked out and there was Keppel, maybe? It was just beautiful. That would be a place I could sit there for a while. I grew up in a place called King Island. I was born there. It's 16 miles wide. I don't know what that is in metres, so it's all going to be old school. It's 16 miles wide at its widest and 49 miles long at its length. Okay, so it's very tiny. Was a sealing station back in the 18th, 19th centuries, where they rendered down seals. It's farming, and when I was growing there, it also had a scheelite mine, which is also known as, and I've just successfully forgotten it. It's a toughener for spaceships. It's what makes the skin of the spaceships going in and out of the Earth, so it doesn't burn up on entry and exit. It's incredibly wild because it's top of mountains, and it's the Great Dividing Range. It's the top of the Great Dividing Range, which goes from, as you know, from Queensland right down to Tasmania. It's one mountain range. And King Island and its mate over the other side, Flinders Island, is the top of mountain ranges. So the rocks that come out of the sea are at that angle, probably about 45-degree angles, and they're razor sharp. So it's bleak. And because it's in the roaring 40s, there's this 20-knot wind that is constant. And because they took down all of the trees to render down the seals back in the day, there's no tree coverage. So this wind just howls from, as you look at it from left to right, just howls across the island. So incredibly bleak. And the people who are long-term families are a strange little puppies. They're very insular, they're very parochial, and very distrustful of outsiders. And as my dad dad and his family, that'd be mum and the 5 kids, we were outsiders because we weren't born there for generations. And that also put a very large barrier to become part of the community of King Island. So, interesting childhood, happy childhood, poor as church mice, but bleak in not only in landscape but also in social interactions. So it's, I don't doubt it's changed very much in the years that we've left. So bleak is the word I use. Milford Sound in South Island of New Zealand, amazing. Absolutely gobsmackingly amazing. Only words for it. In a formal, really, really formal dinner party, basically something like aristocratic meal, way out of my comfort zone. Where, there's about 1,000 pieces of cutlery on the table, you got to know which one goes with what. Nah, way out of my comfort zone. Success to me means that I don't have to worry about where my next meal comes from, that my cats are fed, and I can feed my bills. And yes, I consider myself successful. Surviving David. Do not underestimate the surviving David, with me intact, without being decimated and destroyed by David. That's my greatest accomplishment. All right, my husband David was he was Mensa quality brain space, who was on the spectrum, on the he was diagnosed very late as an Asperger's sufferer. And he was a force of nature. He had very strong beliefs, and if he could steamroll you into his beliefs, then he would. His form of argument was that he would take arguments to their illogical, logical conclusion, and he would tie you up in words. And he was determined, on a subconscious basis, I think, he was determined that he was right in all circumstances. And he wanted me to be, I think there's an old-fashioned word called cipher, which is basically I just wrote down what he said because he had pronouncements from on high. He didn't want me on a conscious level to be anything but what I was when we got married, but unconsciously he wanted to be, for him to be right all the time. And that's depending upon, who was also a depressive, just to make life more interesting. So depending upon where he was in his depressive cycle, and depending upon whether or not his Asperger's was kicking in, he was hell on wheels to live with. So for me to survive as me after 30 years, that's a pretty mean accomplishment. not as in a much more comfortable routine, because I'm not in that at the moment, and that I'm not as stressed about it's all to do with routine, that I will get into a better routine and it will become more natural, because at the moment I'm on a very large learning curve. My cats. I have 4. And they have been a bit of a lifesaver. I just love them to pieces. It means that I don't come home to an empty house, which is a big thing at the moment. Okay, I have a very damaged tortoiseshell called Eris. All my cats are rescue. I have a very large ginger boy called Chaos with a K. I have a ginger and white brick called Kilishandra Ree, known as Killy. And I have a blue cream girl called Lilu Multipass. Blame David. He named it, I didn't. I am one of 5 children. There's boys at each end and there's 3 girls in the middle. I am the youngest of the 3 girls, all right? And my mother, before she died, she was 86 when she died, maybe when she was 75-ish, 80-ish, I asked her how many children did she want, and she said, 2. Which 3 don't you wish me to have had? And I said, number 4, shutting up now. It's a stone groove, my man, which is a painting. The big painting that's on the red coloured wall behind the computer. There's a big painting of a man. It's quite a large canvas, and it's a man sitting in a chair. It's a portrait of the artist's friend, and the artist, Guy Browning, has an amazing ability to do eyes. He does the most amazing eyes. So I take that off. I take that. Last Thursday, we had dinner to celebrate David's dad's would have been 97th birthday, and we sat down to a Greek meal at my favourite Greek restaurant, and his mum was there, his siblings were there, David's siblings were there, my sister and my brother were there, and a couple of friends were there. It was fun. It was a great night. It's a great night. A language. I've always wanted to master a language, but I know I'm not too old at 63, but I'm not quite sure Italian. I always wanted to learn Italian for some unknown reason, and I'm not quite sure. Maybe I'll learn, I don't know, maybe I'll carve out a bit of time and learn to speak Italian. That'd be great. Getting me fit, which is a long-term goal, but short-term goal is getting me fit. Is there anything after we die? No one's come back to tell us yet. We hope. Don't know. Books? Friends? What interests the person I'm having the conversation with? Because even if you don't know anything about the other person's interest, if they're knowledgeable enough and have, they're really enthusiastic, they draw you in to their conversation. You might don't want to know about quantum physics, but if somebody's enthusiastic about it and they can explain to you what it's all about, you get drawn into their world, and it's an interesting conversation. Relationships with my friends and my family. Material success, but having a good relationship with David's family and my family, Margaret notwithstanding. I have a middle sister whom gives new meaning to the word middle child, and I'm not joking. She's the CEO and secretary of that particular department. But I have not just a civil, but a genuinely good relationship with them and my friends as well. Material success. I work because I want to, because it feeds the cats. I don't want to be nibbled on. That's not an unreasonable thing. But yeah, no. I work because I want to. I don't want an empire. Who am I going to give it to or leave it to? I'm me. I've got 4 cats. I'm a family of 1. Why do I need an empire? Ending of Vietnam War. Because my older brother Stephen was called up. He was called up for the Vietnam War, and the then Prime Minister John Gorton, and he was the next lot to go. His mob were the next lot to go. So it's not the ending of the Vietnam War, but Prime Minister John Gorton's saying we're not sending any more of our young men, over to Vietnam, because my brother was the next lot to go, and that Stephen missed out going to be a Vietnam veteran by the proclamation of a man, of a Prime Minister. That's pretty important. Social media, it's a thief of time. You get onto it, and if you talk to most people who use it, they're forever scrolling on their Facebooks or their Twitter accounts, and they think they're having a life when in actual fact they're one step away from it, and they very rarely look up from their phones or from their computers, and they have all of these friends, and I like to call them ghosts in the machine, because unless you can go out and ring them up and say, meet me under the clocks at 12 o'clock, reference, Melbourne has a main railway station called Flinders Street, and it has clocks which tell the time when the next train of different lines are going, and the meeting cry was meet you under the clocks at Flinders Street. And unless you can say that, they're not friends, they're just ghosts in the machine. My mother was a very, for her time, well-educated woman who was brought up in a house with her mother and her mother and her aunt as basically one family, an extended family. She went to secretarial school, and during World War II, she was the secretary, basically personal assistant, of the gentleman who was in charge of supplying the entire Australian Armed Forces. Okay? She was a very amazing lady. And there was a policy of the time of writing to soldiers or military personnel, and Mum started writing to Dad. They married in 1949. So they got together and married in 1949. Mum in a nutshell. Dad was born in Balingup, Western Australia. He was I think he was the youngest. And Dad ran away from Western Australia to get away from his family, all right. I think he was one of 6 children. His dad was 60 when he was born. His mother was 40. His father was born in 1864. Okay? He died in his father was born in 1860. He died in 1964. Okay? And there's a few haircuts there. And his mother was 40. Left school when he was 13, after grade 6, middle of the Depression, went out making fences and getting rabbits. Called up or volunteered for World War II. He was born in 1920, so he was 20 when World War II 1920, when World War II occurred, he became a commando. He was second Commando Force, which is basically West Australian country lads, and was part of, over the umbrella of Sparrow Force, went to Timor and had an interesting time there. Basically, they were cut off from Australia and weren't found. They thought they were either executed or prisoners of war, where in actual fact they were took to the hills of Timor and were guerrillas. Came back, met married mum, came from Western Australia to Victoria. They went back to Western Australia, and Dad was a naughty boy over there. To this day, don't know what happened. Came back and went down to Loyang, somewhere around there, down to the Loyang electricity grids, bit part of that. And then he was offered a soldier settlement farm on King Island. Yay. He should have stayed in more down at the Gippsland. And we went to King Island. When England went into the EU in the early 1970s, we lost our what's the word I'm looking for? We lost our market for our goods, which was cream and milk or butter, and we walked off the farm flat, motherless, busted. Came over to Victoria, stayed there for a while, and then clamped it up to did the clamp it thing, reference to the Beverly Hillbillies. Went up to Queensland where he retired. Dad suffered from PTSD, incredible, and yeah, he lived his life out in Queensland. Don't know anything about my father's father, because he was in Western Australia, and Dad was not a person, and he made it quite clear that he didn't want anything to do with his family. No, his mum died before I was born. As I said, I was 6 when his father died in 1964. Yeah, it makes me 6. My mother's mother died. I have a vague memory of my mother's mother. She died of cervical cancer, and unfortunately I had way too much to deal with. Mum's father, Pop. He was a prick. End of story. Not going to go into it.
Like siblings, perhaps?
I have 2 of each. I have an older brother and a younger brother, and I have 2 older sisters. I am really close with my older sister because she lives in Melbourne. I see her on a very regular basis. My brothers and my other sister live in Queensland. I talk to them on a semi-regular basis, and my middle sister has had nothing to do with the family for 20 years. She decided that we were persona non grata for whatever reason, and she doesn't want to have anything to do with the family, and that's fine. I don't wish her dead, I just don't wish her in my life. She was incredibly rude and foul when our mother was dying from bladder cancer. Got in contact with her because that's what you do, and Mum was in the active phase of dying, which I know sounds really weird, but and I had rung her up a couple of times, and David says, "Oh, Mum's dying." I said, "Yes. Why don't you give the sister a call?" And I said, "It's her mum. She should be calling me to find out." And David, being David, couldn't stop that. He rang her up saying that your mum's dying. If you want to see her, come down. And the woman said, "I don't like you. I've never liked you. If anybody calls me, I'd rather it be my 2 sisters." So, no. That Dad didn't have PSD, and he wasn't a drunk. He was a functional drunk, which made life very difficult. We weren't physically abused, unlike a lot of my contemporaries. He wasn't a hit merchant, or neither was Mum. But the fact that he drank scotch, half a bottle to a bottle of scotch per day, made life very difficult. Times when we went fishing to get away from dairy, the farming, cows need to be milked, demand to be milked twice a day. So we only had a very short period of time between one lot of milking to the night time of milking. So to go and just sit on the sand, fish, whatever, that's good times. Loyalty and acceptance of eccentricities within them. Everybody's weird to a lesser or greater degree, but the acceptance that that's okay, that's okay. Everybody's right. Table thumping. Everybody has very loud opinions. My sister telling my father about how we as children gauged his temper. Because Dad was a commando, he had a beret, okay, a little felt beret, all right, and Dad was 55-ish when Anne told him about the gauge we used to. She said, "You whistled, 5 kids and 2 dogs would turn up." All right, and it was true. 5 dogs and 2 cats, 5 children and 2 dogs would turn up, and everybody would look at his beret, and if the beret was here in a jaunty angle, fair weather, not a problem. If it started to go here, you go, all right, getting a bit thing, and then if he started doing this, and stuck it on the back of his head, 5 kids and 2 dogs would go in all different directions. And when Anne told Dad that, everybody, including Dad, just fell apart the floor laughing because he didn't know. He didn't realise. He said, "I always wondered." He said, and if he started swearing in Tetum, Dad was a very proper man. He wouldn't swear. Bastard was as much as he would use in the way of foul language in front of his wife and his children. Yes, he could swear like a trooper and probably did, where blokey blokes were, but in front of his children and his wife, no, he didn't. So if he started swearing in Tetum, it was a very large get out of here now, because when he lost his temper, he really lost his temper. Dad's dying. Dad was 66. We knew he wasn't going to make really old bones. Dad was 66. He had a massive heart attack, then extended it, had another heart attack, and then making the decision to turn him off the ventilator. It wasn't a decision per se, but because he'd brought us up to from very young, that if his life wasn't what he considered worth living, he'd take his 14-foot dinghy and it would come back, he wouldn't. So he wasn't having a good life. So we had to make the decision, we just had to action his will, but it's still not a great time. Dad's experiences in Timor, because that was probably his defining moment, for the want of a better terminology. It explains a lot. It's not an excuse, but it explains a lot, because his war experiences, and that's not negating Mum, because she has her own traumas, to say the least. But I know more about Dad than I know about Mum. I looked like my mother, and I had my father's temper. Self-reliance and, is it good? I don't know. Stoicism. If we hurt ourselves, we learned very quickly, unless you were losing a lung or losing blood from an arterial spurter, you didn't go, you just You just sucked it up, princess, because he'd go and talk to you, my father, and he'd say, I've had the worst on the side of my eye and never felt it. So, stoicism. Primary, I went until I left the island, went to Yarra Creek School. Learning, weird. I don't have a great memories of childhood. Just going to, being picked up by the bus and going to the school and being brought back. School, High school, my last 2.5 years, I ended up in Queensland, in Southport, the Gold Coast, and it was a culture shock because very much cliques. If you're a greaser, obviously into cars. If you're a surfer, into surf. And I fitted neither. My best friend was a lady who had spastic quadriplegia. She had the cord around her neck, birth cord around her neck. Umbilical cord is the word I'm looking for, around her neck. And she had anoxia, or no oxygen, when she was born, so she didn't walk so well. So that was my best friend. Didn't square peg, round hole, that sort of stuff. Bullied in a subtle way until such time as I was going under, really going under. And then I thought, sod you and the horse you rode in on you. And I thought, I like me. If you don't like me, that's okay. I can live without that. The weirdest thing, the next week, all of a sudden, nothing had changed in me. Everybody wanted to be my friend. Interesting. And I thought, I wasn't good enough last week. Thanks, but no thanks. Conversation. Person-to-person conversation. You look when you go to restaurants or cafes, everybody's on their damn phone. Why be there? Conversation. Or human connection is probably a better way of putting it. Mozart. What did you die of, mate? Because they don't know. Just to talk to Mozart, because his music is amazing, and he was 36 when he died. And I'd just have a natter. Diseases. We don't live in a world where the summer fever comes on and people are in iron lungs. I'm talking about polio. I'm talking about smallpox, where if you get today's population would be horrified about smallpox, polio. Measles isn't as big a drama to me as smallpox, polio, because they just, if you survive, the residue is not great. One generation, not really. My father was a person who didn't go into family history, unimportant, and it's unimportant to me. I don't care. Yes, I am the result of what happened, but I don't care how I got here. I don't know. I'm hoping it'll be better, but I have a very bad feeling, or I have a baseline bad expectation of human behaviour. It's going to be ugly. Wars, because since Cain killed Abel, there's been wars. There's been, until we learn that it doesn't really matter who owns that piece of ground or who owns that piece of property or that particular mineral right. There's going to be wars. Or, what's the word? Not wars, not necessarily wars, but what do they call it? We'll just call it wars, whatever. Realising that what we live on is very precious and very finite. It is not infinite. Very finite. Treat the world with a bit of TLC and treat it for the glorious gem that it is. Yeah, no. Look, maybe. Look, there's always choices. We choose as a race of humans to be aggressive, or some parts of the people, the humans, choose to be aggressive. And we're talking probably the politicians, not so much the military, but the politicians. Their egos are tied up in how big their military forces are. If that changes, there's always a choice, a chance. Drugs. Because surely I'm talking recreational, heroin, marijuana, the recreational drugs, because someone will get in the government, finally get the idea that if they are the suppliers, they will make bucket loads of money. Waking up next to my husband dead. It's not a great one. Horrible. The only thing that made it good was he just slipped away. Horrible. Procrastination. I just procrastinate too long. Nothing more to be said. Is the worst when I was training as a nurse and there was a really sick lady, and I trained under extreme circumstances, and there was a really sick woman who'd been in a car accident the previous night. In retrospect, and she was moved off the ward that afternoon, she should have been in intensive care. Her injuries were such that they were they were just life-threatening. And we're not just talking about one injury that was life-threatening, we're talking about multiple injuries that were life-threatening. It was shocking, it was heartbreaking, and it was hard. Would I change it? Nah. Made me what I am today. You can survive. If I could survive that, I can survive anything. And that's what it comes down to. Mental issues, not that I'm aware of. I tend to be pretty stable that way. I get a bit blah, but I don't get depressed. Physical injuries, I have had a back issue and a back injury, which now has morphed into osteoarthritis in my lower back. That's been problematic for 40 years. So that's about it. I've been pretty lucky, really. If that's the worst I've got, I've done all right. That what I had with David, my husband, would go on. Was not going to change. That changed. That life would go on as it had for the previous 20 years. 30 years close to. Not everybody likes you. Not everybody will like you. And that's okay. That's okay. Surviving rolling my car 5 times, that was pretty amazing when I was young. I was driving in Queensland and there was gravel on the side of the road, and I veered too close to the road and the tyres lost traction. I was going at, not a big speed, but it was obviously going fast enough that the tyres lost traction and I flipped the car 5 times. I walked away from it with a cut on my neck from the seatbelt. Totaled the car. I'm not sure that I am. I'm quite comfortable with the concept of death. I've got a few questions. If there's an afterlife, I've got a few questions to a few people that I want to be answered. But no, I suppose like everybody that my mental acuity stays the same. But am I afraid? Nah, it is what it is. It is what it is. My body image, I like a lot of women, particularly, as I said, I've been overweight all my life. I don't like the way I look. Don't like the way I look. My brother, God bless his cotton socks, said, Pen, you're not an oil painting, but you don't make dogs howl, all right? So that's my younger brother. But yeah, body image, what I look, how I look in clothes, not a fan. Having my antrums, my sinuses washed out under local anaesthetic. Try that for shit and giggles. Actually, it's a combination of cocaine, because they numb the area with cocaine, which is up here. Which anybody who does cocaine has got to have rocks in their head, I tell you that right now. And then they push in a metal tube, which is that has the aperture of about that, and you hear this crunch, crunch, crunch. No, not a fan. I was at a bar in probably Fortitude Valley when I was training back in the 70s, and for some unknown reason, this bloke wanted to punch me out. I have no idea to this day why he wanted to punch me out. I obviously didn't like the cut of my jib. And I said, that's okay. You can have free reign. You get the first free reign. But I said, when I get off, you better make sure that I'm out. He said, why? I said, when I get off the floor, you're mine. What the hell I was going to do, I have no idea. But he just scuttled back into the crowd. I don't think of myself as a victim, okay? So I think that makes a big difference. I believe I believe there's a higher power, all right? Bottom line. A single God? No. I more believe, like the Hindus do, that there is one God, but he has multiple personalities and he splits them off. Bit like what the Greek gods have with their Parthenon of gods. But more Hindu, like it's all one God who is Krishna. But Krishna is also Kali. Kali is Krishna. Ganesha is Ganesha, but it is also Krishna. That makes more sense to me than one single bloke sitting up on a throne saying, I don't like you very much. Kapowie! It just makes more sense to me. And bringing in my Catholic upbringing, golden rule, if you don't want it done to you, don't do it to anybody else. It's a pretty good way of living, I reckon. So if you don't want to have your stuff stolen, don't steal. It's pretty simple. You don't want to get hit, don't be a bully. It's not rocket science. That there are multiverses, that we are one of a multiverse, and there's a slightly different variant of each multiverse. This is our multiverse, but the one either side of us, or the ones either side of us, could be totally different or slightly different. In inverted common stars, Kardashians, for example. What have they ever done except expose themselves both metaphorically and physically? That doesn't make the world better. Or star worship. Oh, please, give me a break. I don't want to know what someone like... let's see who I can think of, someone else. What Cher's doing. She's entitled to her privacy. Or influencers. Oh, please. Please. Give me a break. Way too much. Everybody's too important in their own teacups. Can't say, because my mum and dad, weirdly enough, Dad was religiously egalitarian. would not countenance anybody being discriminated against. And Mum was very much the same. So I can't think of anything that I disagreed with them on. They were pretty middle of the road, except for Dad's, everybody needed to be treated religiously well. So no. Why they will complain about a problem/situation and then go back into it or not change their behaviour or or get the hell out of Dodge to change their life, they will go back into it. All they want to do is complain about it. Don't understand it. Don't understand it. Best thing, you can become the grumpy old man/woman and have the absolute impunity to speak your mind, because what the hell are you going to do to me? I'm 63. Tell my boss, I am my boss. She doesn't care. So there is a freedom of being able to literally speak your mind. It's not the truth, or it's not a truth, it is your truth. The worst, you lose your friends and family. But getting older beats the alternative. Left, pink, not red, pink. Definitely socialist. Sliding scale, but definitely left rather than right. Good history. Good history. Not pick and choose. Good, solid history. So the young generation get an idea of what went before, not cherry-picked. One foot in front of the other. There are, whether it be Dad or David, one foot in front of the other. There is no point in sitting down and being a blubbering mess in the corner. That solves nothing. Pragmatism. Absolute, pure pragmatism. In your own, what works for me is not going to work for everybody else. You have to find your way of dealing. But the only thing is being a blubbering mess in the corner in any situation, that you're allowed to do for a couple of days. After that, that's just self-indulgent. You have to get on with living. It's weird. You get the good, you get the bad, you get the indifferent. It's nice to reference my former job as a nurse, that if I make a mistake, I'm not putting anybody's life at risk, okay? So you lose a book, that's a relief. It's good because I get to deal with a wide range of clientele, and I'm here to tell you that my clientele is from birth until death. I have people coming in buying books for their children, and I have older people coming in buying books so that they can read or to give to their grandchildren or great-grandchildren. So it's a very wide-ranging clientele. And if they're coming in to buy a book, by and large, they're interesting to talk to. I know more about the Civil War than I really want to know about, because people who are obsessive, Civil War is one, trains are another, you've no idea what information you will garner from people just talking about their passions. It's fabulous. It's fabulous. Don't. I mean, and I'm being quite serious. Unless you have a passion for books, it's not, if you go, I'll start that again. If you're going into bookselling to make a fortune, don't even go there, because you're not going to do so. Some of the high-end booksellers may make a lot of money, but they sell a lot of their books on consignment. They don't actually buy the book. One of their clients has got a very uncommon book, and they will on-sell it to other clients, and they have a percentage. They don't actually own the stock. Some of those people do make a few dollars, but booksellers at my end of no, we don't make money. So if you do it for the passion and knowing that it's going to be hard work and it's not clean or easy work, the easiest part about the whole business is being open to the public. So think really hard about it. Difficult because the mental, in my particular case, and it's not for everybody, my husband didn't deal with the fact he had a depressive illness very well. He thought that medication would filter his experiences of the world, it would blunt it. So it was really difficult to get him on to the little bit of medication, and it took 10, 15 years. Difficult to get him on the medication for him to at least address it. And the fact that he had a late diagnosis of Asperger's was an aha moment, and explained a lot of his reactions and his interactions with the world and his family, because he thought his mentation was normal, when in actual fact it wasn't. And it made living with somebody like that very difficult, because sometimes you didn't know from day to day what you got. If he became pedantic, which is his Asperger's kicking in, you knew he wasn't in a good place. You just got your head presented to you on a regular basis. And I found the easiest way to do that is to be Teflon. Just let it slide off. Unless it was unimportant, it was important, I would wait till the depressive phase faded a bit, or he sort of got off his high horse, and then said, well, this wasn't flash. And he would go, and to his credit, he did change a little bit, which is not bad for a person who's got Asperger's. But I wish he could have seen that his life would have been easier if he'd had a more regimented regime for his depression. No idea. I'm hoping I'll do what my husband did, go to bed, not wake up, like we all do, but no idea. I can tell you how I don't want to die, but that's drowning. Been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, no thank you very much. My family, both blood and my husband's family, and then in the next circle, friends. They make the world go round. Holy guacamole is probably closest, because you go, holy guacamole. Yeah, holy guacamole. Disappointment. Pain. Disappointment/pain - embarrassment, because if you are a rational human being, you go, that wasn't good. You learn, you grow. And also, if you don't have pain, or it's all very, you don't know highs, you don't know lows, you don't know highs. I'm going to use a quote from Warren Zevon: eat every sandwich, enjoy now. Don't think about tomorrow, may not happen. Your past is like your bum, it's all behind you. Now. Best time of your life? Now. Don't think about it. Because it never happened. Now. Appreciate what you have. Don't pine for what you may never have. Because if you have an empire, you can't take it with you, whether you be cremated or put into the ground, buried. You can't take it with you. Enjoy your life. As an eccentric bookseller, somebody who was interesting, who wasn't bland. An eccentric bookseller. I took magic mushrooms. That's the most illegal, I think. Yeah, magic mushrooms. Not supposed to take them. Particularly in Indonesia, mate. That was a long time ago. I think the statute of limitations has passed. Red, purple background with a book, open book. With cats. With cats. Who did kill JF Kennedy? Because it's never been, to my satisfaction, explained enough. You know, the magic bullet, and who knows. The other one is, who did kill JC? Jesus Christ. You know, we've people who wrote about his life, wrote about it after he'd been dead for 70 years. And the people who were around him were old men and women. So they're going by their memories. So there's a good one. Time machine. Just to go back and see, because the old saw or the old saying, winners are grinners and they get to write the history. There's a lot of history we don't know. Why not? Because if nothing else, if you have no family, it is a record of your life that someone will find interesting. Parts of it they're going to say, oh, that's boring. But if you have no family, or you want to leave a message to your family under these circumstances, it's a good way of doing so, because questions that you never thought to ask. I mean, everybody knows your colour, your favourite colour, blah-de-blah-de-blah, but the worst memory of the worst day of your life, or the worst work day of your life, they tend to resonate and you tend to remember, but you don't tend to tell anybody about them. And people will find that interesting, because and not only that, obviously, but people will find that interesting and go, wow, I'm not the only person who has that memory or a similar size memory. It's good fun. And it's a what's the word I'm looking for? Come on, Penny, find your words. It's a vault for the future, a vault of information for the future that will not be lost. Bye, camera.